So I think the fracking argument, or the public pressure and public awareness of fracking, is going to come back very, very quickly, and I think with a vengeance. In fact, I would be very interested to see if there are any Green Tories that make a big stink of this at the upcoming Tory conference. Because if the Tories are to sort of remember to secure certainly the red wall, you've got to remember that up in Yorkshire, we've got a lot, I mean a lot, of anti-fracking campaigns that have been somewhat dormant since the victory to put the moratorium on fracking. We've also awaiting the British survey about fracking, which we know the government has, which we know that Liz Truss is currently sitting on. So it's very likely that will not be good when that gets brought out, but they cannot delay that for too much longer because ultimately, well, the opposition will force them to release it. So we know that is going to happen sooner or later. We know that the red wall is going to be certainly kicking back against that quite significantly, along with many, many other things that the plot people in the red wall are not happy with the Tories doing. Even those areas that did vote for Tory for the very first time last time, they are not going to vote for Liz Truss next time around. And if the Tories want to keep in power, they have to keep those red wall seats. And it gets even worse because a lot of these new fracking areas are also down in their own their own homeland, heartlands down south as well. And these are the people that have objected furiously for years of having any onshore wind farms, let alone the offshore farm variant as well. So if they were massively upset about just having a wind farm, what do you think their reaction is going to be now knowing that these fracking sites are now going to be potentially opened down there as well? You can see what a political minefield Liz Truss has just opened for herself in this, and it gets even more interesting because I'm going to go through this today because I think it was the former CEO of Carillia, and I think another guy who was heavily linked with Carillia, although they haven't worked with Carillia for quite some time, did this piece for The Guardian that, yeah, we support fracking, but it ain't going to work for the UK. And they spell out a number of reasons why it's not going to work. So before we go diving into that, because I think this is sort of shows you the opposition there really is to sort of fracking and how politically damaging this is going to be to the Tory party, who currently a lot of them are very, very much on board trying to support it for bizarre reasons sometimes. But there you go. But anyway, before we do go diving into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there is the thank you button as well down below, and of course the YouTube Pony Club as well. So as always, thank you very much. I've just realized I'm trying to show off my t-shirt, but never mind. I don't know why I did that subconsciously, but never mind. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for joining us today. Like I say, off we go over to the gardens. Like I say, read this because I think these two people who have written this is sort of fascinating and just goes to show you how the fracking argument is going to come back with a vengeance. So, in one of her first acts as Prime Minister, Liz Truss has pledged to lift the ban on fracking in England, with the aim of opening up access to Britain's very copious onshore natural gas resources. You would imagine that we, as the founder and former public affairs director of the Carillia Resources, an oil and gas exploration company, would welcome this news. Although we are no longer involved with Carillia, we believe this news is positive, but it is misleading to imply that the announcement will lead to a meaningful supply of new gas in the UK in the foreseeable future. We believe that there are other, more practicable steps that could be taken to produce significant energy in a more timely manner. here's why. Fracking, more technically known as hydraulic fracturing, is necessary to liberate methane molecules that the hard shales and many other rock types, but this takes place at least 2 to 4 kilometers below the surface, about the distance between Buckingham Palace and the Tower of London, under a number of impenetrable layers of rock. The techniques have been made needlessly controversial in the UK due to a misrepresented concerns about isolated incidents of groundwater contamination and microseismicity. I think I said that right. And the former of which only take place when there are mistakes made during well management. And fracking has been regarded as a safe practice by knowledgeable regulators in other countries such as the US, Canada, Australia, Argentina, and others, and countries where many thousands of wells are currently fracked on an annual basis. So there are a lot of people, I'm sure, that will disagree with those statements, but that is fine. But let's face it, those are two of the big concerns around fracking, water security and, of course, potential seismic activity. But as we've seen from this current Tory party, they really don't care about regulation. They're all about, let's get rid of regulation. So we'll have to see where we go from there. But it is interesting that you have these people who are very sort of, yes, we are pro-fracking, but this isn't going to solve the UK's energy crisis, which, again, is the more key point, because the Tories are selling fracking as the answer to the energy crisis. But as we're about to find out, it's not, because you need more energy now, not later. And as many people have pointed out, even if you do start doing fracking, it's not like they're going to start selling gas just to the UK market or at a lesser amount than what the world price for gas currently is. Like, as even Kozu Katang said, these businesses aren't charities, they're businesses. But anyway, let's get back to it. So we would not be able to import liquid natural gas from the US and Canada if it were not produced by fracking in those countries. Disagreements about safeties are not the real challenge, however. In our view, there are two key additional barriers: the technical and economic feasibility, and the socio-political alignment around the scale. First, just because a resource exists does not mean it is feasible or economic to actually extract it. In Lancashire, we learned in 2011 that the shale foundations are extremely gassy. There are also very heavily faulted and compartmentalized, unlike the generally continuous gas-bearing formations underlying large parts of Pennsylvania, Texas, and Alberta. Learning how to recover this gas will take time, and indeed may create low-level, short-lived ground tremors, an issue that in Britain has been blown dramatically out of proportion. The construction and rail industries would not be able to exist under the standards that have been applied to onshore gas recovery. On top of this, the UK is a very expensive place to operate. Governments have singled out the energy sector for regulations that impede operations that are the standard in agriculture and other industries. The upshot is that the operation that in US, Canada, and even Argentina is a rapid piece of keyhole surgery in the UK is preponderous, slow-moving, and a costly operation. The democratic process has created these regulations, and we are not criticizing them. But from an investment point of view, Britain's cost to envelop itself a significant barrier to raise many tens of billions of pounds required to embark on a meaningful UK shale gas program. Today's high gas and oil prices are not by themselves sufficiently inefficient for investors. Existing investments in LNG infrastructure commissioned before the war began mean that Europe will have plentiful gas available, much from fracked wells in other countries, with a return to pricing normality in 2 to 3 years. The second issue is the enormous scale of the operations that will be required to replicate even just 10% of UK natural gas. Thousands of wells would need to be completed over the next 30 to 50 years, with the drilling and fracking of hundreds of wells a year. This would mean dozens of rigs and fracking crews in continuous mobilization across the country. And at whatever, the company, we learned firsthand of how much this kind of industry activity is resented in Britain. Many of those crews would be from America, and Britain does not manufacture much of the relevant equipment. Most of that would be European and North American. Even if the UK were to generate sufficient gas, and we are not likely to see lower gas prices, any more than living next to a farm would mean paying less for milk. We are governed by regional market pricing, and an increasement of 10% from one country would be a stretch. It is not enough to change regional pricing. In summary, the socio-political and economic barriers to fracking are high. This is why we, as veterans of the fracking protests, are skeptical about the prospects of shale gas at scale in the UK. So, as you can see, even people who are like pro-fracking are saying, yeah, to do this at the scale you would seriously need to even make a dent in supply isn't worth it. And again, they go on to sort of talk about this and what the true points are. So they talk about how tidal is a lot more important. It's a lot more doable. So ultimately, if you've got a government who is not prepared, as we've said before, not prepared to really invest in proper supplies of energy sources from especially tidal, something that we have in abundance being an island, but they are not prepared to invest in it where you could get these up now, and not just sort of, tidal, the sort of renewable, but nuclear as well. I think we've got to, especially on the left, have a real big reconciling about nuclear power, because ultimately at the moment, renewables alone cannot do it. The only way to generate mass, and we're talking mass amounts of electricity that we need, is with nuclear. Like it or not, that's the point. But of course, people worry about nuclear accidents, etc., etc. As we're seeing things with Fukushima. You've got Zaporizhia out in Ukraine at the moment that's generating a lot of sort of news about nuclear stuff. Obviously, the worst case scenario, Chernobyl. But there are hundreds of thousands of nuclear power plants around the world that operate very well and very safely because they are well regulated. There are rules and laws in place to make sure that these places are safe and that they are reliable and that accidents will not happen. So, as I know, there are still a lot of people out there who are still going to be very, very anti-nuclear, and I know, I get it, I understand the arguments, but when you're talking about how much electricity we really need to generate, renewable sources alone just aren't going to cut it. But making small steps and going that way and getting rid of more fossil fuels is a fantastic place to start. And I think that you've even seen this here, where you've got two people from probably, in a lot of people's eyes, one of the most hated companies in all the UK are saying, yeah, we're big fans of, fracking, but even we can see the fact that you've got this massive tidal potential, and that's where all the money that you're currently putting into fracking should be really going. Maybe you should, reconsider your plans. But of course, as always, this is the Tories we're talking about. They ain't going to listen to these two or any experts when it comes to saying, well, maybe you should think again about your plans. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link where you can, buy me coffee. And thanks you always for the people who do buy me coffee every so often. And of course, thank you very much to the people who hit the like and share button. And of course, say of course far too much. But yes, we'll see you all next time.